Bullies tried to slap the new girl's cheek. Big mistake. She was a deadly fighter. Maya Novak pressed her forehead against the cool window of her father's pickup truck as they pulled into the parking lot of Westlake High School. The September morning sun cast long shadows across the sprawling brick building, making it look even more imposing than it had during her registration visit 2 weeks earlier. At 16 years old, she had become an expert at reading the geography of new schools, cataloguing the unspoken territories and invisible boundaries that defined teenage social order. This was her third high school in 4 years, each move dictated by her father's military career, each transition requiring her to master a new set of rules, faces, and hierarchies. "You going to be okay, kiddo?" her father asked, his weathered hands gripping the steering wheel. Colonel James Novak had served 3 tours in Afghanistan as an Army Ranger before transitioning to a training position that kept them moving from base to base. Despite his intimidating military bearing, his eyes held nothing but concern for his daughter. "I'll be fine, Dad," Maya replied, adjusting her thick-rimmed glasses that had a tendency to slide down her nose. Her wavy brown hair, which seemed to have a mind of its own, regardless of how much product she applied, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. At 5 feet 4 inches with a slight frame that she deliberately disguised with oversized hoodies and loose-fitting jeans, Maya had perfected the art of blending into the background. It was a carefully cultivated invisibility that served her well as the perpetual new student. What no one at Westlake High would know, what no one at any of her schools ever discovered until absolutely necessary, was that Maya Novak had been training in mixed martial arts since her 7th birthday. 9 years of intensive training had transformed her seemingly delicate frame into a precisely calibrated instrument of self-defense. Her muscles, lean and efficient rather than bulky, were hidden beneath her deliberately baggy clothes. She held a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, had competed in youth MMA tournaments under assumed names to maintain her anonymity at school, and could execute a rear-naked chokehold that would have a 200-pound opponent tapping out in seconds. The training had started the day after her 7th birthday, when her father had taken her to a small dojo run by his former army buddy, Master Chen, a soft-spoken man who had served in special forces before opening his martial arts school. Maya still remembered that first lesson, how Master Chen had knelt down to her eye level and spoken words that would define her approach to conflict for the rest of her life. "The strongest warriors," he had said, his voice gentle but firm, "are those who win without fighting. But when fighting becomes necessary, when there is no other choice, then you must be swift, decisive, and controlled. Never fight from anger. Never fight to prove yourself. Fight only to protect." Those words echoed in Maya's mind as she grabbed her backpack from the truck's floor. The bag contained her usual school supplies, but also a carefully folded GI that she kept with her always, a reminder of who she really was beneath the camouflage of teenage normalcy. "Remember what we talked about," her father said as she opened the door. "This time we're staying put until you graduate. No more moves, I promise. So try to, make friends." Maya finished with a wry smile. "I know, Dad. I'll try. And if anyone gives you trouble, walk away if possible. Defend myself if necessary. Never escalate." She recited the mantra they'd established years ago. "I know the rules." Her father nodded, though she could see the worry that never quite left his eyes when he dropped her off at a new school. He'd seen too much in his military career, knew too well how cruel people could be to those they perceived as different or weak. It was why he'd insisted on the martial arts training, why he'd spent countless hours in their garage-turned-gym teaching her techniques he'd learned in the Rangers, why he'd made sure she could protect herself in any situation. Maya watched the truck pull away before turning to face Westlake High School. The building was massive, easily twice the size of her last school, with multiple wings spreading out from a central hub. Nearly 2,000 students attended classes here, creating a complex ecosystem of social groups, cliques, and hierarchies that would take weeks to fully map. But Maya had gotten good at quick reconnaissance, at identifying the power players and danger zones within her first few days. The main entrance was already crowded with students, clusters of friends reuniting after summer break, couples engaging in public displays of affection that violated several pages of the student handbook, athletes in Letterman jackets moving through the crowd like they owned the place. Maya slipped through the chaos with practiced ease, keeping her head down but her senses alert, cataloging faces and group dynamics as she navigated toward the main office to pick up her final schedule. The hallways of Westlake were wide and lined with trophy cases displaying decades of athletic achievements, academic honors, and photographs of notable alumni. The walls were painted in the school colors of burgundy and gold, with motivational posters and student artwork breaking up the monotony. The smell was universal to every high school Maya had attended, a mixture of industrial cleaning products, cafeteria food, teenage body spray, and that indefinable scent of academic anxiety. She had memorized the layout during her registration visit, so finding her locker was simple enough. Number 8, 47. Top row, combination 31-17-45. She spun the dial with practiced efficiency, organizing her supplies with military precision. Each textbook had its place, each binder color-coded by subject. Organization was control, and control was survival in the chaos of high school. "You're new." The voice came from behind her, not a question, but a statement. Maya turned to find a girl with intricate braided hair and kind eyes watching her with curiosity. She wore a student council pin on her cardigan and had the confident bearing of someone comfortable in their social position. "I'm Aisha," the girl said, extending her hand with a genuine smile. "Student Council Welcome Committee. It's literally my job to help new students get acclimated." Maya shook her hand, noting the firm grip and the lack of judgment in Aisha's expression. "Maya Novak, Junior." "Military family?" Aisha asked, then laughed at Maya's surprised expression. "The way you organized that locker was a dead giveaway. We get a lot of military kids rotating through. My dad's stationed at Fort Harrison, so I know the drill." For the first time since arriving, Maya felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease slightly. "Air Force Base, actually. My dad's with the Army, but he's doing inter-service training coordination." Aisha nodded knowingly. "Must be tough, all the moving around. This your first civilian school?" "No, but it's the biggest. My last school had maybe 600 students total." "Well, Westlake can be overwhelming at first, but you'll get used to it. Let me give you the real tour, not the sanitized version they probably gave you during registration." Aisha glanced at her phone. "We have 15 minutes before first period. Come on." As they walked, Aisha provided a running commentary that was both informative and slightly alarming. She pointed out the different territories with the expertise of an anthropologist, describing tribal boundaries. "See that hallway by the gym? That's where the jocks congregate. Mostly harmless unless you criticize the football team's losing streak. The art wing is super chill. Everyone there is too focused on their projects to cause drama. The smoking section behind the cafeteria is technically off limits, but the teachers pretend not to know about it as long as nobody actually lights up on school property." They passed a group of students in expensive clothes, designer bags casually slung over their shoulders, talking in voices that carried an undertone of entitlement. "Rich kids," Aisha explained unnecessarily. "They mostly keep to themselves. Too worried about maintaining their image to bother with anyone outside their tax bracket." Maya nodded, filing away the information. Then they turned a corner, and Aisha's expression changed, becoming more serious. "Okay, real talk? See those guys over there? She nodded toward a group of 3 boys holding court near the east stairwell. "That's Vince DeRosa and his crew. You want to stay away from them." Maya studied the trio with the analytical eye her father had trained her to develop. The leader, Vince, was obvious. Tall, conventionally handsome in that carefully cultivated way that suggested significant time in front of mirrors, with perfectly styled dark hair and clothes that managed to toe the line between school-appropriate and deliberately provocative. He had the kind of smile that teachers found charming and other students found either magnetic or terrifying, depending on whether it was directed at them or about them. The larger boy next to him had to be Travis Wheeler. Aisha had mentioned the football team, and this guy had linebacker written all over him. He was easily 6 feet 2 inches and built like someone who spent considerable time in the weight room. His Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders, and he laughed too loudly at whatever Vince was saying, the kind of performative loyalty that spoke to hierarchy rather than genuine friendship. The third member of their group was leaner, more angular. Dylan Parks had the kind of cold, calculating eyes that reminded Maya of the kids at her previous schools who took genuine pleasure in finding and exploiting weaknesses. While Vince had charisma and Travis had physical presence, Dylan had something more dangerous, the intelligence to be truly cruel. "They pick a target every semester," Aisha continued, her voice lower now. "Usually someone new, someone who seems weak or different. Last year, they made this freshman kid's life so miserable, he transferred schools mid-semester. The year before that, a girl ended up in therapy." "And the administration doesn't do anything?" Maya asked. Though she already knew the answer, it was the same at every school. "Vince's dad is on the school board. Travis is the coach's star linebacker. Dylan's mother donates ridiculous amounts to the school fundraisers." Aisha shrugged, with the resignation of someone who had learned to accept systemic unfairness. "They're careful too. Never anything that can be definitively proven as bullying. Just lots of little incidents that add up to making someone's life hell." Maya watched as Vince said something that made his companions laugh, the sound sharp and predatory. Travis shoved a passing freshman who had gotten too close to their territory, not hard enough to be considered assault, just enough to establish dominance. Dylan watched, with those cold eyes, cataloging reactions, filing away weaknesses for future exploitation. "Thanks for the warning," Maya said, already mentally adjusting her routes through the school to avoid that particular stairwell. "Just looking out," Aisha replied. "Come on, I'll walk you to your first class." The morning passed in the typical blur of first-day introductions, syllabi reviews, and textbook distributions. Maya had advanced placement chemistry first period, where she chose a seat in the middle of the classroom. Not so far forward as to be labeled a teacher's pet, not so far back as to seem disengaged. She introduced herself when required with minimal information: name, previous school in Virginia, interest in science. Nothing memorable, nothing that would make her stand out. In AP English Literature, she recognized Dylan Parks sitting in the back row, his attention seemingly focused on his phone beneath the desk. She chose a seat on the opposite side of the room, keeping him in her peripheral vision without making eye contact. He didn't acknowledge her presence, which suited her perfectly. Calculus brought Travis Wheeler, who spent the entire period complaining to his neighbor about having to take advanced math for his college applications. The teacher, Mr. Peterson, ignored the disruption with the practiced blindness of someone who had learned to pick their battles. Maya focused on her notebook, working through practice problems and maintaining her invisibility. By lunchtime, she had mapped out the basic social geography of her classes and identified several alternate routes between them. The cafeteria presented its own challenges, a vast space filled with circular tables that were clearly claimed by established groups. Maya had brought her own lunch, planning to eat in the library as she had at her previous schools, but Aisha appeared at her elbow before she could escape. "Absolutely not," Aisha said firmly. "I know that look. You're not eating alone in the library on your first day. Come sit with us." The US turned out to be a small group of students who seemed to exist in that comfortable middle space of high school society. Not popular enough to be targets of envy, not unpopular enough to be targets of mockery. There was Jennifer, a theater kid with purple streaks in her hair and an infectious laugh. Marcus, who wore a chess club t-shirt unironically and could quote entire scenes from obscure science fiction movies. Sarah, quiet and artistic, who spent most of lunch sketching in a notebook. They welcomed Maya with the easy acceptance of people who knew what it was like to not quite fit in. The conversation flowed from complaints about homework to debate about whether the new superhero movie would live up to the hype. Maya found herself relaxing slightly, allowing herself to engage in the normal teenage discourse she usually avoided. She was laughing at one of Marcus's stories about a disastrous chess tournament when she felt the shift in the cafeteria's atmosphere. Conversations around them quieted, and she became aware of a presence behind her before she heard the voice. Well, fresh meat. Maya turned slowly to find Vince DeRosa standing behind her chair, flanked as always by Travis and Dylan. Up close, she could see that his seemingly casual pose was carefully calculated, positioned to loom without technically invading her personal space. His cologne was expensive and applied with a heavy hand, the kind of scent that announced its wearer's arrival before they entered a room. "I'm Vince," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I make it a point to personally welcome all our new students." "Maya," she replied simply, her voice neutral. "Maya." He drew out the syllables like he was tasting them. "That's an interesting name. Where are you from, Maya?" "Around," she said, deliberately vague. Travis laughed, the sound more bark than genuine amusement. "Around? That's not very friendly." "Leave her alone, Vince," Aisha interjected, but Vince didn't even glance at her. "I'm just being welcoming," he said, his tone suggesting wounded innocence. "We like to make sure new students understand how things work here at Westlake. Wouldn't want anyone to accidentally end up somewhere they don't belong." The threat was subtle, but unmistakable. Dylan had pulled out his phone and was openly taking photos, not of Maya specifically, but of the table, the kind of reconnaissance that suggested future targeting. "I appreciate the concern," Maya said evenly. "I'm sure I'll figure things out." Vince's smile widened. "I'm sure you will. Some people are quick learners. Others need more hands-on instruction." Travis cracked his knuckles, the gesture almost comically obvious. Dylan just watched with those calculating eyes, already categorizing her responses, her potential weaknesses. "We'll be seeing you around, Maya," Vince said, making her name sound like a promise of future attention she didn't want. "Welcome to Westlake." They sauntered away, leaving a wake of whispers and sympathetic looks. Maya turned back to her lunch, appetite gone. "I'm sorry," Aisha said quietly. "I hoped they wouldn't notice you so quickly." "It's fine," Maya lied, already calculating how much more difficult her plan to remain invisible had just become. "It's not fine," Jennifer said fiercely. "They're assholes. Someone should stand up to them." "Yeah, and end up like Kevin Martinez," Marcus countered. "He tried to stand up to them last year. They made his life so miserable, he literally had a breakdown in the middle of history class." Maya listened to them debate, but her mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios and contingencies. She'd dealt with bullies before, knew their patterns and escalation tactics. The best strategy was always to be too boring to bother with, to offer no reaction that could feed their need for dominance. But Vince's attention suggested she'd already failed at that first crucial step. The rest of the day confirmed her fears. Her books were accidentally knocked from her hands as she walked between classes. Dylan, passing by with an innocent expression and an insincere sorry. Her locker was mysteriously jammed with gum when she returned to it after final period, requiring maintenance to open it. Small incidents, easily dismissed individually, but Maya recognized the testing pattern. They were probing for reactions, establishing her as their semester project. At home that evening, she worked through her frustration on the heavy bag in the garage, her wrapped hands connecting with precise force. Her father watched from the doorway, reading the tension in her movements. "First day that bad?" he asked when she finally stopped, breathing hard but controlled. "Just the usual new kid stuff," she said, unwrapping her hands. He studied her with the analytical gaze that had kept him alive through 3 combat deployments. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If someone's giving you trouble." "I know, Dad. It's nothing I can't handle." "The best fight is the one you avoid," he reminded her, the same lesson he'd been teaching since she was 7. "But when you can't avoid it, end it quickly," she finished. "I remember." He nodded, but she could see the concern in his eyes. "Your mother would have known what to say," he said quietly. "She was always better at this stuff than me." Maya's mother had died when she was 5, a car accident that had changed the trajectory of both their lives. It was partly why her father had been so insistent on the self-defense training. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her too, of her being in a situation where she couldn't protect herself. "You do fine, Dad," she assured him, giving him a quick hug before heading inside to start her homework. The next 2 weeks followed a predictable pattern of escalation. Maya tried every avoidance tactic she knew, taking alternate routes to classes, eating lunch in different locations, arriving early and leaving late to avoid hallway confrontations. But Vince and his crew seemed to have made her their special project. And they were persistent. The psychological warfare came first. Warfare. Whispers followed her through the hallways, rumors she couldn't quite pin down, but felt in the way conversations stopped when she approached. Someone had created a social media page called Westlake's Newest Loser, featuring unflattering photos taken without her knowledge. Her hair escaping from its ponytail, her glasses sliding down her nose, her face concentrated in thought during a test. The page was taken down within a day, but screenshots circulated in group texts she wasn't part of, but knew existed. Travis specialized in physical intimidation that stayed just within the boundaries of plausible deniability. He would stand too close in the lunch line, his bulk forcing her to step back or be pressed against him. He would suddenly appear around corners, causing near collisions that were always her fault for not watching where she was going. Once, during gym class, a basketball had been thrown with suspicious force directly at her head, Travis's apology loud and theatrical for the teacher's benefit. Dylan was more insidious. He had somehow accessed her class schedule and made sure to be waiting outside random classrooms, just watching. He would sit near her in the library, not saying anything, just observing her with those cold eyes. He started a rumor that she'd been expelled from her previous school, the details vague enough to let imagination fill in the worst possibilities. But it was Vince who orchestrated it all, who appeared at carefully calculated moments to deliver comments wrapped in false concern. "You look tired, Maya. Not sleeping well?" When he knew Dylan had been texting her number from burner phones at 3 a.m. "That's an interesting outfit choice," when Travis had accidentally spilled chocolate milk on her earlier that day. "I heard you're having trouble making friends. That must be so hard for you." When he'd made sure anyone who showed interest in befriending her received their own warnings, Maya endured it all with stoic calm that seemed to frustrate them more with each passing day. She didn't cry, didn't lash out, didn't give them the reactions they were seeking. She treated each incident as if it were genuinely accidental, responding to their false apologies with polite acceptance that gave them no ammunition. At home, she intensified her training, working through complex grappling sequences with her father. practicing her striking combinations until muscle memory made them as natural as breathing. The physical exertion helped burn off the anger and frustration she couldn't show at school. "You're hitting harder lately," her father observed one evening after a particularly intense session. "Something you want to talk about?" Maya pulled off her gloves, considering how much to tell him. "There are some guys at school. They're just testing boundaries." His expression darkened. "Do I need to have a conversation with the administration?" "No," she said quickly. She'd seen what happened when parents got involved. It only made things worse, gave the bullies a reason to escalate, to punish the snitch. "I can handle it. They'll get bored eventually." But they didn't get bored. If anything, her lack of reaction seemed to be taken as a challenge. The incidents became more frequent, more creative. Her homework disappeared from her backpack, only to be found in the boys' bathroom. Her combination lock was superglued shut. Someone had written "loser" on her locker in permanent marker that took the janitor an hour to remove. Aisha tried to help, offering to walk with her between classes, to be a buffer against the harassment. But Maya could see the fear in her friend's eyes, the knowledge that attracting Vince's attention was dangerous. She started avoiding Aisha, not wanting to make her a target by association. 3 weeks into the semester, things took a darker turn. Maya had stayed after school to work on a chemistry project in the lab. The school was mostly empty, just a few students in various clubs and sports practices. She was carrying her project materials to her locker when she heard footsteps behind her in the empty hallway. "Working late, Maya?" Vince's voice echoed off the walls. She turned to find all 3 of them spread out in a semicircle, blocking any retreat. The hallway was deserted. No teachers, no other students, no witnesses. "Just heading home," she said, proud of how steady her voice remained, despite the adrenaline suddenly flooding her system. "That's a lot of stuff to carry," Travis observed, moving closer. "Maybe you need some help." Before she could respond, he grabbed her project, weeks of work contained in a carefully constructed molecular model, and held it up like he was examining it. "Careful with that," she said, allowing a hint of urgency into her voice. "Or what?" Dylan asked, that cold smile playing at his lips. "You'll tell? Get us in trouble? I don't think you're the type to snitch, Maya. You're too smart for that." Travis started tossing the model from hand to hand like a football, the delicate structure threatening to break with each catch. "Please," Maya said, hating the word, but knowing they needed to hear it. "That's 3 weeks of work. Hear that, guys?" She said please. Vince stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his cologne mixed with the mint gum he was always chewing. "Maybe, if you ask really nicely, we'll give it back." This was the game, she knew. They wanted her to beg, to cry, to give them the power they craved. Maya calculated her options quickly. She could let them destroy her project, take the hit to her grade, rebuild it over the weekend. It was the smart play, the safe play. Travis fumbled the catch deliberately, and the model crashed to the floor, breaking into dozens of pieces that scattered across the linoleum. "Oops," he said with exaggerated dismay. "Butterfingers." Dylan laughed, the sound sharp and cruel. "Guess you'll be pulling an all-nighter to fix that. If you're smart enough to rebuild it, that is." Maya knelt to gather the pieces, her hands steady despite the rage burning in her chest. She'd spent hours on that model, had perfected the bond angles and molecular geometry. Now it was just scattered atoms of plastic and broken connections. "Oh, are you going to cry?" Vince crouched beside her, his voice mock-sympathetic. "It's okay, Maya. Some people just aren't cut out for advanced classes. Maybe you should transfer to something more your speed, like study hall." She looked up at him then, and for just a moment, she let him see what was beneath her careful mask. The hundreds of hours of training, the competitions she'd won, the opponents she'd defeated. Something in her expression must have shown, because Vince actually leaned back slightly, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced by his usual arrogant smile. "There she is," he said softly. "I was wondering if there was anything interesting under all that pathetic. Turns out you do have a backbone. Too bad it won't do you any good." He stood, gesturing for his friends to follow. "See you around, Maya. Try not to work too hard. Wouldn't want you to burn out before midterms." They left her there, kneeling among the broken pieces of her project. Maya gathered every fragment, her mind already calculating how to rebuild, how to make it even better. But beneath the practical considerations, something had shifted. They'd seen her mask slip, had glimpsed something that intrigued rather than satisfied them. The harassment was going to get worse. She was right. Over the next week, the targeting became more personal, more invasive. Someone had gotten into her social media accounts. She suspected Dylan's technical skills and posted embarrassing fake status updates before she could delete them. Her gym clothes were stolen from her locker, forcing her to do PE in her regular clothes and take the participation point deduction. Food was accidentally spilled on her at lunch with such regularity that she started bringing extra clothes. But it was the isolation that hurt the most. Other students, even those sympathetic to her situation, kept their distance. Being seen talking to Maya meant risking becoming a target themselves. She understood their fear, didn't blame them for their self-preservation, but the loneliness was a weight that grew heavier each day. The teachers seemed oblivious, or perhaps willfully blind. Maya suspected the latter. It was easier to not see what you didn't want to deal with. Vince was charming in class, Travis was crucial to the football team's success, and Dylan's mother had just funded new computers for the library. What was one new student's comfort compared to those considerations? Maya's training intensified. She spent hours each evening in the garage, working through increasingly complex scenarios with her father. He'd noticed the change in her intensity, but hadn't pushed for details. Military families understood that sometimes you dealt with things through action rather than words. "Remember," he said one night after a particularly intense sparring session, "anger makes you stupid. If you fight from emotion, you've already lost." "I know," she panted, wiping sweat from her forehead. "Do you?" He studied her with those sharp eyes. "Because you're fighting like someone with something to prove." "Maybe I do have something to prove," she admitted. "To who? Them or yourself?" It was a good question, one she didn't have an answer for. Friday of the fourth week brought everything to a head. Maya had stayed after school to retake a quiz she'd missed when someone had falsely reported her for cheating, requiring a lengthy investigation before she was cleared. The accusation had been anonymous, but she recognized Dylan's handiwork in the carefully crafted language that stayed just within the bounds of plausibility. The school was mostly empty by the time she finished, the hallways echoing with that hollow quality they got when drained of students. She was heading to her locker to retrieve her weekend homework when she heard them, voices echoing from the east stairwell. Her first instinct was to turn around, take the long way around to the other stairwell, but that would mean walking all the way to the other side of the building, and she was tired. Tired of running, tired of avoiding, tired of letting them dictate her movements through the school. She could hear them talking, their voices casual and unguarded in what they assumed was privacy. "Getting boring," Travis was saying. "She doesn't do anything. No crying, no freaking out." "Patience," Vince replied. "Everyone has a breaking point. We just haven't found hers yet." "Maybe we need to step it up," Dylan suggested. "Something more personal." "Like what?" Travis asked. There was a pause, then Dylan's voice, lower now. "I did some digging. Her mom died when she was 5. Car accident. Maybe we could—" "No," Vince's voice was sharp. "We're not going there. We have rules." "Since when do you have limits?" Dylan sounded genuinely surprised. "Since always. We push people, we don't destroy them. There's a difference." Maya stood frozen, processing what she'd heard. They had limits, lines they wouldn't cross. It was oddly reassuring and disturbing at the same time. They were cruel, but calculatedly so. They wanted to break her spirit, not her entirely. She should have walked away then, taken the long route, avoided the confrontation. But something in her, some combination of exhaustion and anger and 4 weeks of accumulated frustration, made her continue forward. They were lounging in the stairwell like they owned it, which in the social geography of Westlake they essentially did. Vince was leaning against the wall, scrolling through his phone. Travis was sitting on the steps, massive frame taking up most of the width. Dylan was perched on the railing, that ever-present calculating look in his eyes. They looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across their faces before being replaced by predatory interest. "Well, look who it is," Vince said, straightening from the wall. "Maya, nobody, all alone." "I need to get through," she said simply. "You need to?" Vince raised an eyebrow. "That sounds like a you problem, not an us problem." Travis stood, his bulk blocking the stairway completely. "There are other stairs. Maybe you should use those." "Or maybe," Dylan added, sliding off the railing with feline grace, "she wants to hang out with us. Is that it, Maya? Finally ready to admit you're desperate for attention?" They were closing in, that semi-circle formation they'd used before. Maya felt her body responding, weight shifting to the balls of her feet, hands relaxing at her sides in ready position. But she forced herself to remain still, to project the same non-threatening demeanor she'd maintained for weeks. "I just want to go home," she said, allowing exhaustion to color her voice. Let them think she was weak, tired, beaten down. "Hear that, guys?" Vince moved closer. "She just wants to go home, maybe to cry about how mean everyone is at her new school. I bet she writes in a diary." Travis laughed. "Dear diary, today the mean boys were mean to me again." "Actually," Dylan said, pulling out his phone, "I bet she writes poetry, bad, angsty poetry about how no one understands her." He held up his phone, and Maya's stomach dropped. On the screen was a photo of her notebook, her private notebook that she kept in her backpack. They'd gone through her things, photographed pages of her personal writing. Not poetry, but worse, letters to her mother that she wrote but never sent, a coping mechanism her therapist had suggested years ago. "Dear Mom," Dylan read in a mocking voice, "I miss you every day. Dad tries, but stop." The word came out harder than Maya intended, an edge of steel that made Dylan pause. "Or what?" Vince stepped directly in front of her. "What are you going to do about it, Maya? Tell on us? Get us in trouble? We both know you won't do that. You're too smart, too scared." "I'm not scared of you," Maya said quietly, and for the first time it was true. Angry, frustrated, exhausted, yes, but not scared. Vince laughed. "You should be. You have no idea what we could do to you. We've been playing nice, but that can change." "You've been playing nice." Maya felt something snap inside her, the carefully maintained control finally cracking. "Stealing my work, spreading rumors, going through my private things, that's playing nice compared to what we could do." Vince's smile was cold. "Yes." Travis moved behind her, too close, his presence looming. "Maybe she needs a more hands-on lesson about respect." And then she felt it, Travis's hand sliding down her back, heading toward her rear. The touch was deliberate, violating, meant to humiliate and establish dominance. Time seemed to slow down. Maya's mind processed multiple threads simultaneously, the hand moving lower, Vince's smirk, Dylan still holding her private thoughts on his phone, the empty hallway, the lack of witnesses, the three of them against one of her. Her father's voice echoed in her mind. "The best fight is the one you avoid. Master Chen's wisdom followed. Never fight from anger. But then, clearer than both, fight only to protect. She needed to protect herself, not just from the immediate threat of Travis's wandering hand, but from the escalation that would follow if she let this happen. They would see it as permission, as proof that she would accept anything they did to her. The hand was still moving. Without conscious thought, 9 years of training took over. Maya spun, catching Travis's wrist in a grip that made him gasp. Using his own momentum and weight against him, she guided him face first into the wall with a modified armbar that had him completely under her control in less than a second. "What the—" Vince started, but Maya was already moving. She released Travis, who stumbled back in shock and turned to face Vince. He was reaching for her. Whether to grab or push, she didn't know and didn't care. She caught his extended arm, pivoted on her heel, and used a classic judo throw to send him over her hip. He hit the ground hard, the air leaving his lungs in a whoosh that echoed through the stairwell. Dylan, seeing both his friends incapacitated in seconds, dropped her phone and rushed at her with a wild haymaker punch that telegraphed his complete lack of fighting experience. Maya ducked under it easily, grabbed his shirt, and used his forward momentum to flip him over her shoulder. He landed next to Vince with an impact that would leave bruises for weeks. The entire confrontation had taken less than 10 seconds. 3 boys, each significantly larger than her, were on the ground groaning while she stood in the center, not even breathing hard. Travis was pushing himself up from the wall, his face red with shock and humiliation. There was fear in his eyes now, the kind that comes from discovering the kitten you'd been tormenting was actually a tiger. "Don't ever touch me again," Maya said, her voice low and controlled. Each word was precisely articulated, carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Don't speak to me, don't look at me, leave me alone." She picked up her notebook from where Dylan had dropped it, taking time to dust it off while the 3 boys struggled to their feet. The power dynamic had shifted so completely that the stairwell felt like a different universe than it had been 30 seconds ago. "You're insane!" Travis gasped, rubbing his shoulder. "No," Maya corrected, adjusting her glasses which had barely shifted during the altercation. "I'm trained. There's a difference." She looked at each of them in turn, making sure they understood. "I've been doing mixed martial arts since I was 7. I have a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I compete at the national level. I could have hurt you, really hurt you. But I didn't. That was restraint. Don't make me show you what I can do when I'm not holding back." Vince was sitting up now, still struggling to breathe normally. The arrogance had been literally knocked out of him, replaced by something Maya had never seen on his face before, respect mixed with fear. "This doesn't change anything," he wheezed, though even he didn't sound convinced. "It changes everything," Maya replied. She stepped over him, heading for the stairs. "Oh, and Dylan? If I see any of those photos anywhere, if you share them or use them against me, I'll report you for theft and invasion of privacy. I'm sure the school board would be very interested to know that their donated computers are being used to cyber-bully students." She walked down the stairs without looking back, though every nerve was alert for signs of retaliation. But none came. Behind her, she could hear them slowly getting to their feet, groaning and cursing, but not following. It wasn't until she was outside the building, the cool afternoon air hitting her face, that the full impact of what had happened hit her. Her hands started shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash and the knowledge of how completely her life at Westlake had just changed. She had revealed her secret, used her training in anger despite years of discipline, and essentially declared war on the most powerful social group in school. Her father was going to be disappointed. Master Chen would say she had failed the most important test, not whether she could fight, but whether she could choose not to. But beneath the worry and self-recrimination was something else: relief. 4 weeks of harassment, of daily indignities and constant vigilance were over. Whatever came next, at least she wouldn't be a victim anymore. She walked home slowly, replaying the confrontation in her mind, analyzing her technique with the critical eye of someone who'd been trained to break down every movement. The armbar on Travis had been textbook perfect. The judo throw on Vince could have been smoother. She'd used more force than necessary, letting emotion creep in. Dylan's takedown had been almost too easy, his complete lack of training making him vulnerable to even basic techniques. Her father's truck was in the driveway when she arrived home. She stood outside for a moment, gathering her thoughts, preparing for the conversation that was about to happen. He was in the kitchen, preparing dinner with the methodical efficiency that turned cooking into another form of tactical operation. He looked up when she entered, and she saw his expression change as he read something in her face. What happened? No preamble, no small talk. That was her father, straight to the point when it mattered. Maya sat at the kitchen table and told him everything. Not just the confrontation in the stairwell, but the weeks of harassment leading up to it, the escalating incidents, the moment Travis had tried to touch her inappropriately. Her father listened without interruption, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You waited too long to act," he finally said. Maya blinked in surprise. "What?" "The moment he tried to touch you, that crossed a line. You had every right to defend yourself. I'm not disappointed that you fought. I'm disappointed that you let it go on for so long before you did. But you always said that the best fight is the one you avoid, and you tried that. For 4 weeks you tried that. But some people only understand force, Maya. Some people will keep pushing until they meet resistance." He sat down across from her. "What you did was self-defense, pure and simple. Never apologize for protecting yourself." "The school might not see it that way," Maya pointed out. "3 of them, 1 of me. They're popular. I'm nobody." "You're not nobody," her father said firmly. "You're my daughter, and if the school tries to punish you for defending yourself against assault, they'll have to deal with me." The weekend passed in a haze of anxiety. Maya expected phone calls, police visits, some form of retaliation, but nothing came. She trained in the garage, working through her forms with meditative focus, trying to center herself for whatever Monday would bring. Sunday evening, Aisha texted her. "OMG, Maya, everyone's talking about what happened. Are you okay?" So word had spread. Maya wasn't surprised. Secrets didn't stay secret long in high school. She wondered what version of events was being circulated, how distorted the story had become in the retelling. Monday morning came too soon. Maya's father insisted on driving her to school, though he respected her request to be dropped off a block away rather than at the main entrance. "Remember," he said as she got out, "you did nothing wrong. Walk in there with your head high." Easier said than done. The moment Maya stepped onto school property, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. Conversations stopped mid-sentence as she passed. Students she'd never spoken to whispered behind their hands, pointing not so subtly in her direction. "Is that her? I heard she put Travis Wheeler in the hospital. Someone said she broke Dylan's arm. Vince is telling everyone he let her win. Sarah saw the security footage. She destroyed them." Security footage. Maya's heart skipped. She hadn't considered cameras in the stairwell, but of course they would have them. Evidence of the confrontation, of Travis's attempted groping, of her response. She made it to her locker without incident, though the space around her remained clear as other students gave her a wide berth, whether from fear or respect she couldn't tell. "Maya!" She turned to find Aisha approaching with Jennifer and Marcus, their expressions a mixture of awe and concern. "Are you okay?" Aisha asked. We've heard about 15 different versions of what happened, but they all end with you taking down Vince and his crew." "I'm fine," Maya said, organizing her books with unnecessary focus. "Fine?" Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "You supposedly took on the 3 biggest bullies in school and won, and you're fine. Is it true you're like a ninja or something?" Jennifer asked eagerly. "I train in martial arts," Maya confirmed, seeing no point in denying it now. "Have since I was a kid." "That's so badass," Jennifer breathed. "How did they not know? How did nobody know?" "Because I didn't want anyone to know," Maya replied. "I just wanted to get through high school without any drama." "Well, that plan definitely failed," Marcus observed, then quickly added, "Not that it's your fault." They had it coming. The warning bell rang, and Maya headed to chemistry, aware of the bubble of space that followed her through the hallways. In class, even the teacher seemed aware of the shifted dynamics, his eyes lingering on her with curiosity. It was second period when the announcement came. "Maya Novak, please report to Principal Winter's office immediately. Maya Novak to the principal's office." The walk to the administrative wing felt like a funeral march. Maya had been through this before at her first school. The victim of bullying called in to explain why they'd finally snapped, why they couldn't just handle it the right way, why they had to make trouble for everyone. But when she entered the office, she found not just Principal Winters, but her father in full military dress uniform. He'd changed after dropping her off, the decorated Army Ranger looking every inch the warrior he was. "Miss Novak," Principal Winters began, her expression unreadable. "Please, have a seat." Maya sat, her father's presence beside her both comforting and concerning. Parents were only called in for serious disciplinary actions. "I've spent the morning reviewing security footage from Friday afternoon," the principal continued. "All of it. Not just the stairwell incident, but the weeks leading up to it." She pulled out a tablet and turned it toward Maya. On the screen was a compilation of incidents: her books being knocked down, her locker being vandalized, Travis accidentally colliding with her, dozens of moments of harassment she'd endured. "I also reviewed this," Principal Winters said, swiping to another video. It was the stairwell confrontation, crystal clear, Travis's hand sliding down toward her rear, her efficient response, the complete takedown of all 3 boys in under 10 seconds. "I see clear evidence of sustained harassment culminating in attempted sexual assault," the principal said bluntly. "I also see a textbook case of self-defense executed with remarkable restraint." Maya blinked in surprise. This wasn't going how she'd expected. "However," Principal Winters continued, and Maya's heart sank. There was always a however. "We have a zero-tolerance policy on fighting." "With all due respect," Maya's father interjected, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to command, "that policy should also apply to sexual assault and sustained bullying. Yet I don't see the perpetrator sitting here." "You're absolutely right, Colonel Novak. Which is why Mr. DeRosa, Mr. Wheeler, and Mr. Parks are currently in the conference room with their parents, receiving their suspension notices." Maya couldn't hide her shock. "They're being suspended." "Mr. Wheeler for 10 days, pending possible criminal charges for sexual assault. Mr. DeRosa and Mr. Parks for 5 days for bullying and creating a hostile educational environment." The principal's expression softened slightly. "We also discovered this isn't the first time they've targeted a student this way. 3 previous victims have come forward since Friday." "So Maya's not in trouble?" her father asked. "On the contrary, while I can't officially condone violence as a solution to problems, I recognize self-defense when I see it." Principal Winters turned to Maya. "I understand you're trained in martial arts?" "Yes, ma'am. 9 years of mixed martial arts with a focus on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu." "Impressive." The principal leaned back in her chair. "We have a growing problem with bullying in this school. We also have a non-existent self-defense program. I wonder if you might be interested in helping to change that. What do you mean? I'd like to start a girls' self-defense club. Obviously, we'd need an adult supervisor, but having a peer instructor, someone the students can relate to, would be invaluable. Would you be interested? Maya looked at her father, who nodded slightly. Yes, Mom. I'd like that. Excellent. We'll work out the details once things settle down. Principal Winters stood, indicating the meeting was over. For what it's worth, Miss Novak, I'm sorry you were put in a position where you had to defend yourself. That's a failure on our part, and we'll be implementing new measures to prevent this from happening again. As they left the office, Maya saw Vince, Travis, and Dylan in the conference room with their parents. Travis was slumped in his chair, while his father, a man who looked like an older, angrier version of his son, gestured wildly. Dylan's mother, dripping in designer clothes and indignation, was clearly arguing with the vice principal. And Vince was looking directly at her through the glass. Their eyes met for a moment, and Maya expected to see anger or resentment. Instead, she saw something else. A grudging respect mixed with what might have been shame. The rest of the day was surreal. News of the suspensions spread rapidly, and with it, a shift in the social dynamics of Westlake High. Other victims of the trio's bullying began approaching Maya, sharing their stories, thanking her for standing up to them. "They made my freshman year hell," one girl told her. "I used to throw up every morning from anxiety." "Travis shoved me into a locker every day for a month," a sophomore boy admitted, "but I was too scared to report it." By lunch, Maya found herself at the center of attention she'd never wanted but couldn't avoid. The table where she sat with Aisha and her friends was crowded with students wanting to hear the real story, to understand how a quiet new girl had taken down the school's most feared bullies. "Can you teach me that arm bar move?" one girl asked eagerly. "When does the self-defense club start?" another wanted to know. "Is it true you compete nationally?" Maya answered questions as briefly as possible, uncomfortable with the hero worship, but understanding that something important had shifted. The culture of fear that Vince and his crew had cultivated was breaking down, replaced by a sense that standing up to bullies was possible. A week passed before the suspended students returned. The school felt different without them, lighter somehow, as if a storm cloud had passed. The Self-Defense Club had its first meeting with over 40 girls showing up to learn basic defensive techniques. Maya demonstrated simple but effective moves: how to break a wrist grip, how to create distance from an attacker, how to use an assailant's weight against them. "The goal isn't to win a fight," she explained, echoing her master's teachings. "It's to create an opportunity to escape, to get safe." When Vince, Travis, and Dylan returned, they were different. Subdued. Travis in particular seemed to actively avoid any contact with female students, keeping his hands visible and maintaining careful distance in hallways. Dylan had apparently had his phone and computer privileges revoked by his parents and spent most of his time in the library actually studying. But it was Vince who surprised Maya the most. He approached her after school on his first day back, when she was setting up for the self-defense club. She tensed, ready for confrontation, but his body language was completely non-threatening. "Can we talk?" he asked. Maya considered refusing but decided to hear him out. "You have 2 minutes. I wanted to apologize," he said, and the words seemed to physically pain him, not because I have to, but because what we did was wrong, really wrong. Yes, it was. "I've been thinking a lot during suspension," he continued, "about why I do the things I do. My dad, he's not a good person. He taught me that power means making other people feel small. That respect comes from fear." Maya remained silent, letting him work through his thoughts. "But when you took us down, When you had us completely at your mercy, you didn't humiliate us. You could have really hurt us, but you didn't. You just wanted to be left alone. He met her eyes. That's real strength, isn't it? Knowing you can destroy someone, but choosing not to. My sensei taught me that the strongest warriors are those who win without fighting, Maya said. But sometimes fighting is necessary to protect yourself or others. Vince nodded. I get that now. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve that. But I wanted you to know that I understand what we did was wrong and it won't happen again. To anyone. How do I know this isn't just another manipulation? Vince pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. It was the Westlake's newest loser social media page with a new post. This page was created to bully and hurt someone who didn't deserve it. Maya Novak is not a loser. She's probably the strongest person in this school. The real losers are the ones who created this page. VDR. It doesn't fix anything, he said, but it's a start. Maya studied him, looking for deception, but found only what appeared to be genuine remorse. You're right. It doesn't fix anything, but it's a start. Over the following weeks, changes continued to ripple through Westlake High. The self-defense club grew to include boys as well, with Maya teaching alongside a professional instructor the school had hired. Vince, surprisingly, became one of the most dedicated students, approaching the training with a humility that seemed foreign to his previous personality. Travis struggled more with the changes. His position on the football team became tenuous as coaches and teammates grappled with his actions. Eventually, he quit the team voluntarily, focusing on his studies and maintaining a low profile. Maya occasionally saw him in the hallways, and he would nod respectfully, but never approach. Dylan found his own path to redemption through the Computer Science Club, where his technical skills were appreciated for positive purposes. He developed an app for anonymous bullying reporting that was adopted school-wide. One afternoon, about a month after the incident, Maya was working on a chemistry project when someone sat down across from her in the library. She looked up to find Vince, but not the Vince from before. This version looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. I need your help, he said quietly. Maya raised an eyebrow, waiting. There's a freshman, Tommy Morrison. Some of the JV football players are targeting him. The same way we... He trailed off, then continued. The way we used to operate. And I want to stop it. But they won't listen to me. They think I've gone soft. He looked frustrated. I helped create this culture, and now I don't know how to fix it. Maya considered him. You can't fix it alone. Culture changes take time and consistent effort from multiple people. Will you help? It was a loaded question. Helping Vince meant aligning herself with her former tormentor, potentially damaging her reputation among those who saw her as a hero for standing up to him. Not help you, she clarified, but I'll help Tommy. And if you're serious about changing things, you'll follow my lead. They developed a plan. Maya approached Tommy directly, offering him support and protection through the Self-Defense Club network. Vince worked behind the scenes, using his remaining social influence to make it clear that bullying was no longer acceptable. When the JV players persisted, Maya organized a demonstration during lunch, where she showed Tommy and other potential victims basic defensive moves, with Vince volunteering as the attacker she repeatedly took down. The message was clear. Bullying would not be tolerated, and victims would be empowered to defend themselves. Principal Winters took notice of the shifting dynamics and formalized some of the changes. The Self-Defense Club became an official part of the physical education curriculum. Peer mediation programs were established, with former bullies working alongside their victims to address conflicts. The anonymous reporting app Dylan had created was integrated into the school's official safety protocols. 3 months after the stairwell incident, Maya found herself standing in front of the entire student body at an assembly about bullying prevention. She hadn't wanted the spotlight, but Principal Winters had insisted that her story needed to be heard. "I came to Westlake hoping to be invisible," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "I'd been the new kid so many times that I'd learned it was easier to hide than to be seen. But hiding didn't protect me from bullying. It made me an easier target." She looked out at the sea of faces, finding Aisha and her friends smiling encouragingly, seeing Vince in the back row listening intently, noticing Travis and Dylan scattered throughout the crowd. "For weeks, I endured harassment because I thought fighting back would make things worse. And maybe in some situations that's true, but when someone crosses the line into physical assault, you have every right to defend yourself. The key is knowing the difference between necessary defense and unnecessary violence." She demonstrated a few basic moves, explaining the principles behind each one. These techniques aren't about being tough or proving you're strong. They're about creating safety for yourself and others. Real strength isn't about dominating others. It's about having the power to hurt someone and choosing not to unless absolutely necessary. The assembly ended with thunderous applause, but Maya was just relieved to step out of the spotlight. She preferred the quieter work of the twice-weekly self-defense sessions, the one-on-one mentoring with students who reminded her of herself. Quiet, targeted, afraid. One such student was Lily Wheeler, Travis's younger sister. She'd joined the self-defense club in its second week, a quiet freshman with her brother's sandy hair, but none of his bulk or bravado. "He's different now," Lily told Maya one afternoon after practice. "Travis, I mean. He won't talk about what happened, but he made me promise to tell him if anyone ever bothers me. He said he doesn't want me to ever feel like I can't protect myself." "People can change," Maya said carefully. "Sometimes it takes a shock to make them see who they've become." "He was becoming our father," Lily said quietly. "Dad's a bully too, just an adult version. Travis was following that path until you stopped him. It was a sobering reminder that the cycle of bullying often started at home, passed down from generation to generation like a toxic inheritance." As the semester progressed toward winter break, Maya found herself in an unexpected position. No longer invisible, no longer the new kid trying to hide. She had become a central figure in Westlake's transformation. Students she'd never spoken to would nod respectfully in the halls. Teachers consulted her about students they were concerned might be victims of bullying. Even the local newspaper had run a story about the self-defense program, though Maya had declined to be interviewed. The last day before winter break brought an unexpected encounter. Maya was cleaning up after the final self-defense session of the semester when she found Vince, Travis, and Dylan waiting outside the gym. Her body tensed automatically. 9 years of training preparing for potential threat. "Relax," Vince said, holding up his hands. "We come in peace." "What do you want?" Maya asked, maintaining safe distance. The three boys exchanged glances, seeming to have a silent conversation about who would speak. Finally, Travis stepped forward. "We wanted to thank you," he said, the words clearly difficult for him, "and to give you this." He held out a small, wrapped package. Maya didn't take it. "It's not a trick," Dylan added. It's an apology, a real one." Maya slowly accepted the package, unwrapping it carefully. Inside was a keychain with small brass knuckles and a note. "To the girl who taught us all to stand up for ourselves. Thanks for the wake-up call. V.T.&D. Standing up to us took courage," Vince said, "but not destroying us when you could have. That took wisdom. We were heading down a bad path and you stopped us, literally." "I didn't do it for you," Maya reminded them. "We know," Travis said, "but we benefited anyway. I was becoming someone I didn't want to be, someone my sister would be afraid of. You helped me see that. The self-defense club, the anti-bullying initiatives, the culture change at school, none of that would have happened without you," Dylan added. You turned the worst thing we ever did into something positive for everyone." Maya looked at the keychain, then at the 3 boys who had made her first months at Westlake miserable. They looked different now, not physically, but in their bearing. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something more genuine. "I hope you've actually learned something from this," she said. "Not just about not bullying, but about empathy, about understanding the damage you can do to another person." "We have," Vince said solemnly. "I've been seeing a counselor, actually, working through some stuff about my father, about learned behaviors. It's not an excuse for what I did, but I'm trying to understand it so I don't repeat it." "I've been volunteering at the middle school," Travis offered, "teaching younger kids about respectful behavior, about consent, about not using physical size to intimidate, trying to stop them from becoming who I was. And I'm working with the administration on improving the cyberbullying protocols," Dylan said, "using my technical skills for good instead of what I was doing before." Maya attached the keychain to her backpack, a small gesture of acceptance, if not forgiveness. "People can change," she said, "but change requires consistent effort, not just grand gestures." "We know," Vince said. "We're trying. We'll keep trying." As they parted ways, Maya reflected on the strange journey of the past few months. She'd started the semester wanting nothing more than to be invisible, to slide through high school unnoticed. Instead, she'd become a catalyst for change, a symbol of standing up to bullies, a teacher and protector. Winter break passed quietly. Maya spent the time training with her father, refining her techniques, preparing for the spring tournament season she could finally participate in openly. There was freedom in not having to hide her abilities anymore, in being able to be completely herself. Her father watched her work through a complex grappling sequence on their practice mat, pride evident in his expression. "You know, your mother would have been proud of how you handled everything." Maya paused, breathing hard. They rarely talked about her mother directly. "She always said the measure of a person isn't their strength, but how they use it," he continued. "You used yours to protect yourself, and then to protect others. That's exactly what she would have wanted." When school resumed in January, Maya arrived to find a surprise. The east stairwell, site of the confrontation that had changed everything, had been transformed. Where once it had been a territory ruled by fear, it was now decorated with student artwork promoting kindness and respect. A plaque on the wall read, "This space is dedicated to all students who have found the courage to stand up for themselves and others." "Bit much, isn't it?" a familiar voice said behind her. She turned to find Vince looking at the plaque with a mixture of embarrassment and acceptance. "It was the principal's idea," he explained. "She wanted to reclaim the space or something, turn a negative location into a positive one." "And you're okay with it? Everyone knowing this is where I hit rock bottom?" Vince finished. "Yeah, I'm okay with it. Maybe if other people see how low bullies can sink and how much damage they can do, they'll think twice." They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Vince spoke again. "Can I ask you something? That day when you took us all down, you could have really hurt us. You had the skills and the justification. Why didn't you?" Maya considered the question. "My sensei taught me that violence should always be the minimum necessary to ensure safety. You were neutralized as threats. Anything more would have been revenge, not self-defense." "But didn't you want revenge? After everything we did?" "Of course I did," Maya admitted, "but acting on that want would have made me no better than you were. The difference between a warrior and a bully is self-control." Vince nodded slowly. "I'm starting to understand that. The self-defense classes are helping. Learning how much damage you can do makes you think twice about doing it." The spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities. The self-defense club had become so popular that they had to split it into beginner and advanced sections. Maya found herself teaching the advanced class, working with students who showed real aptitude for martial arts. One of her most dedicated students was surprisingly Vince. He approached the training with a seriousness that would have seemed impossible months earlier, focusing not on dominating opponents, but on understanding the philosophy behind the techniques. "You're holding back," Maya told him during a sparring session. "You're afraid to engage." "I don't want to hurt anyone," he replied, and the irony of the statement wasn't lost on either of them. This is controlled sparring. The point is to learn control, to understand your own strength and how to moderate it. If you don't engage fully, you're not learning. It took weeks, but gradually Vince found the balance between aggression and control. He would never be a natural martial artist. He thought too much, analyzed when he should react, but he developed competence and, more importantly, respect for the art. Travis took a different path. Unable to return to football due to the stigma of his suspension, he channeled his physical abilities into wrestling, a sport that required discipline and respect for opponents. He excelled at it, finding that the structured competition gave him an outlet for his aggressive tendencies without allowing them to spill over into bullying. Dylan surprised everyone by becoming an advocate for digital privacy and anti-cyberbullying initiatives. He gave presentations to younger students about the permanent nature of digital cruelty, about how screenshots last forever, about the real people behind the screens who could be devastated by online harassment. As the school year moved towards spring, Maya found herself part of a strange alliance. The former bullies had become, if not friends, then at least allies in the effort to change Westlake's culture. They worked together on various initiatives, Vince on peer mediation, Travis on athletic mentorship, Dylan on digital safety, and Maya on self-defense and empowerment. The transformation wasn't perfect or complete. There were still incidents of bullying, still students who tried to use intimidation and fear to establish dominance. But now, there was a framework for addressing it, a community of students who would stand up for victims and consequences that were actually enforced. One afternoon in April, Maya was called to Principal Winter's office. She arrived to find not just the principal, but a man she didn't recognize, middle-aged, wearing a suit that suggested school board or district administration. "Maya, this is Dr. Harrison from the district office," Principal Winters explained. "He's been following our anti-bullying initiatives with great interest." "Miss Novak," Dr. Harrison said, shaking her hand. "I've been reviewing the dramatic decrease in bullying incidents at Westlake since the implementation of your self-defense program and the peer support networks. The transformation is remarkable." "It wasn't just me," Maya said uncomfortably. "A lot of people contributed to the changes." "Perhaps, but you were the catalyst. The incident in the stairwell, while unfortunate, became a turning point for the entire school culture." He pulled out a folder. "We'd like to implement similar programs district-wide. Would you be willing to help train peer instructors at other schools?" Maya looked at Principal Winters, who smiled encouragingly. "It would only be a few hours a week, and you'd receive community service credits. Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Maya, you have an opportunity to help students across the district who are facing what you faced. Your experience and skills could make a real difference." That evening, Maya discussed the offer with her father over dinner. "It's a big responsibility," he said thoughtfully, "but you've shown you can handle responsibility. The question is whether you want to." "I never wanted to be visible," Maya reminded him. "This would make me even more of a public figure." "True, but visibility can be a form of protection for others. When bullies know there are consequences, when victims know there's support, it changes the entire dynamic." "Is that why you wanted me to learn to fight? So I could protect others?" Her father set down his fork, considering his words. "I wanted you to learn to fight so you'd never be helpless. But what you've chosen to do with those skills, teaching others, changing systems, building community, That's all you. That's your mother's influence, her belief in making things better for everyone, not just yourself. Maya made her decision that night. She would help with the district-wide program, but with conditions. The focus would be on empowerment and prevention, not just physical techniques. Former bullies who showed genuine change would be included in the programs, demonstrating that redemption was possible. And the emphasis would always be on de-escalation and escape, with physical confrontation as the last resort. The first district training was held in early May. Maya stood before a room of student volunteers from 6 different high schools, nervous but determined. In the audience, she saw Vince, Travis, and Dylan, who had volunteered to share their perspectives as reformed bullies. 4 months ago, she began, I was cornered in a stairwell by 3 bullies who had been tormenting me for weeks. One of them tried to sexually assault me, and I defended myself. That moment of crisis became a catalyst for change, not just for me, but for our entire school. She looked at the 3 boys who had once been her tormentors, now sitting ready to support her message. The students who bullied me are here today, not as examples of what to fight against, but as proof that people can change. They've become part of the solution instead of the problem. That's what this program is about, not just self-defense, but community transformation. The training went well. Students learned basic defensive techniques, but also conflict resolution, bystander intervention, and how to create support networks for vulnerable peers. The former bullies' testimonies were powerful, their honesty about their motivations and the damage they'd caused making a strong impact. I bullied because I thought it made me powerful, Vince told the group. But real power is lifting others up, not tearing them down. It took getting put on my back by someone half my size to learn that lesson. I used my physical size to intimidate, because that's what I learned at home, Travis admitted. But size doesn't equal strength. Maya proved that. Real strength is protecting those who can't protect themselves. I hid behind screens and anonymity to hurt people, Dylan said. I thought being clever meant finding weaknesses to exploit. Now I use those same skills to protect privacy and prevent cyberbullying. Intelligence should solve problems, not create them. As the school year drew to a close, Maya reflected on the journey from invisible new girl to reluctant hero to community leader. It wasn't the high school experience she'd planned or wanted, but it had become something meaningful. The last self-defense class of the year was packed. Students who'd been training all year demonstrated their skills for friends and family. Maya watched with pride as her students showed not just physical techniques, but the confidence that came with knowing they could protect themselves. Lily Wheeler performed a perfect escape from a wrist grab, her movement fluid and confident. Her parents were in the audience, her father looking uncomfortable but trying to be supportive, her mother beaming with pride. Travis stood with them, cheering louder than anyone when his sister succeeded. After the demonstration, as people were leaving, Maya found herself standing with Aisha, who had become one of her closest friends through everything. "Did you ever think your senior year would go like this?" Aisha asked. "I thought I'd be invisible," Maya admitted. "Count down the days until graduation and move on to college without anyone remembering I existed. Instead, you changed an entire school, maybe an entire district." "We changed it," Maya corrected. "It took everyone, students, administration, even the bullies themselves, to make real change. But it started with you standing up for yourself. That took incredible courage." Maya thought about courage, about the different forms it could take. The courage to fight back when assaulted, the courage to teach others, the courage to forgive, if not forget, the courage to transform a negative experience into positive change. "My mom used to say that courage isn't the absence of fear," she said. "It's doing what's right despite the fear." Your mom sounds like she was wise. She was. I think she would have liked how this all turned out. Not the bullying part, obviously, but the community that came from it. As they walked out of the gym, Maya saw Vince waiting by the door. He'd stayed after everyone else had left, clearly wanting to say something. "This is goodbye, isn't it?" he said. "You're graduating next year, probably going to some amazing college far from here." "Probably," Maya agreed, "but the programs we've built will continue. The culture change is bigger than any individual." "I know, but I wanted to say that meeting you was both the worst and best thing that happened to me this year. Worst because it forced me to see who I'd become. Best because it gave me the chance to become someone better." "You did the work of changing," Maya pointed out. "I just provided the wake-up call." "A pretty dramatic wake-up call," Vince said with a rueful smile. "Being thrown to the ground by someone half your size tends to make you reconsider your life choices." They shook hands, a gesture that would have been impossible to imagine months earlier, and parted ways. The final week of school brought reflection and recognition. Maya received a citizenship award from the district, which she accepted on behalf of everyone who'd contributed to the anti-bullying initiatives. The local newspaper ran a feature story about Westlake's transformation, though Maya declined to be photographed. On the last day of school, Maya cleaned out her locker, the same locker that had been vandalized with gum and graffiti months earlier. Now, it bore a small sticker someone had placed there, a cartoon tiger with the words "Strength Through Peace" beneath it. "You ready for summer?" Aisha asked, appearing beside her. "More than ready. Dad and I are going to visit some colleges, and I have a martial arts tournament in July. Still weird that you can compete openly now. Weird but good. No more fake names or hiding trophies." They walked out of Westlake High together, passing the east stairwell one last time. The space that had once been the site of confrontation and fear had become something else entirely. A reminder that change was possible, that courage could overcome cruelty, that even the darkest moments could become catalysts for light. Summer passed with college visits, tournament competitions, where Maya placed second nationally in her weight class, and preparation for senior year. She stayed in touch with the self-defense program, helping train new peer instructors and refining the curriculum based on the year's experience. When senior year began, Maya returned to Westlake as something she'd never expected to be, a respected leader. The girl who'd wanted invisibility had become highly visible, but she'd learned to use that visibility as a shield for others. The self-defense program had evolved into a comprehensive wellness initiative that included physical training, mental health support, and community building. Former victims and former bullies worked side by side, proving that change and redemption were possible. Vince had become student body president, running on a platform of inclusive leadership and restorative justice. His campaign had been honest about his past mistakes and focused on how people could grow beyond their worst moments. Travis had earned a wrestling scholarship to a state college, his aggression channeled into competitive success and mentorship of younger athletes. He'd become an advocate for consent education, using his own shameful actions as a cautionary tale. Dylan had been accepted early admission to MIT, his technical skills now focused on developing apps and systems to protect vulnerable populations online. He'd testified before the school board about digital safety, his insider knowledge of cyberbullying tactics making him an effective advocate for prevention. As Maya walked through Westlake's halls that first day of senior year, she thought about the strange journey that had brought her here. The quiet new girl who just wanted to survive had become a warrior for change, not through seeking conflict, but by refusing to be victimized when conflict found her. The east stairwell stood as testament to transformation. Where once 3 bullies had cornered a girl they thought was weak, now stood a memorial to courage, not just Maya's courage in defending herself, but the courage of an entire community to confront its toxic culture and choose to change. In her college application essays that fall, Maya wrote about the experience, though she focused not on the dramatic confrontation, but on what came after, the slow, difficult work of building something better from the ruins of what was broken. True strength, she wrote, isn't measured in the ability to defeat opponents, but in the wisdom to transform adversaries into allies. The 3 students who bullied me are now 3 of the strongest advocates for change in our school. That transformation, from perpetrators to protectors, represents the real victory. College acceptance letters came in spring, and Maya chose a university known for its criminal justice program and martial arts team. She planned to study law, focusing on victim advocacy and restorative justice. The girl who'd once wanted to be invisible had found her voice and her purpose. The week before graduation, Principal Winters called her to the office one last time. Waiting there were Vince, Travis, and Dylan, along with several other students who'd been instrumental in the culture change. "I wanted to thank all of you," the principal said. "When I took this position 3 years ago, Westlake had a serious bullying problem that seemed intractable. What you've accomplished this year has transformed not just our school, but become a model for the entire district." She handed each of them a certificate of recognition, but then pulled out something else, a bound report titled "The Westlake Model: From Crisis to Community." "The district has formally adopted your initiatives as standard practice. Every high school will have peer-led self-defense training, restorative justice programs, and reformed bully advocacy groups. You've created a lasting legacy." After the meeting, the unlikely group stood together in the hallway, processing what they'd just heard. "We actually did it," Travis said, disbelief in his voice. "We actually changed things." "Maya did it," Vince corrected. "We just followed her lead." "No," Maya said firmly. "Change this big doesn't come from one person. It comes from a community deciding to be better. You 3 could have stayed angry after I humiliated you in that stairwell. You could have escalated, sought revenge. Instead, you chose growth. That's on you, not me." "You gave us the chance to choose differently," Dylan pointed out. "Another person might have destroyed us completely, and honestly, we would have deserved it." "Destruction is easy," Maya replied. "Building is harder, but more worthwhile." Graduation day arrived with the kind of perfect June weather that seemed designed for new beginnings. Maya sat with her class, no longer the invisible new girl, but still preferring to blend into the crowd when possible. Her father sat in the audience, his dress uniform decorated with the medals that told stories of his own courage. When her name was called to receive her diploma, the applause was thunderous. Students she'd trained, administrators who'd supported the programs, and even 3 former bullies who'd become unlikely allies, all stood in recognition. Later, at the reception, Maya found herself standing with the original self-defense club members, the girls who'd first joined when she was just teaching basic escape techniques in a borrowed gym space. "I still remember that first class," Jennifer said. "You were so nervous but trying to hide it." "I was terrified," Maya admitted. "I'd never taught anyone before. I kept thinking, what if someone actually needs to use this and I taught it wrong?" "But you didn't teach it wrong," Lily Wheeler said. She'd become one of the program's star students, her confidence transformed from those early days as Travis's timid freshman sister. "You taught us to be strong, to stand up for ourselves and others. And you taught my brother to be better," she added quietly. "Our whole family is different now. Dad's even started anger management counseling." The ripple effects of that moment in the stairwell continued to spread in ways Maya could never have predicted. Change, real change, happened not in dramatic confrontations, but in the 1,000 small choices that followed. As the reception wound down, Maya found herself back at the east stairwell one final time. The space had been transformed so completely it was hard to remember it as the site of fear and confrontation. Student artwork covered the walls, motivational quotes bordered the windows, and that plaque honoring courage served as a permanent reminder of transformation. She wasn't alone. Vince, Travis, and Dylan had gravitated to the same spot, perhaps drawn by the same reflective mood. "Feels like a lifetime ago," Travis said, looking at the spot where Maya had slammed him into the wall. 9 months, Dylan corrected. 9 months since we were the kings of this stairwell, ruling through fear. 9 months since Maya dethroned us, Vince added with a wry smile. Best thing that ever happened to us, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. They stood in comfortable silence, 4 people who should have been enemies, but had become something more complicated. Not friends, exactly, but allies united by a shared experience that had transformed them all. "What do you think would have happened if that day had gone differently?" Travis asked. "If you hadn't fought back?" Maya considered the question. "You would have escalated. Someone would have gotten seriously hurt eventually. You were on a trajectory that only ended badly." "And you?" Vince asked. "What would have happened to you?" "I would have survived," Maya said with certainty. "I always survive, but other students, the ones who couldn't defend themselves, they would have suffered. In a way, you 3 chose the perfect victim, someone who could stop you." "Fate?" Dylan suggested, then shook his head. "No, that's too easy. Takes away our responsibility. We chose to bully, and you chose to fight back. Those choices created this moment." As they prepared to leave Westlake High School for the last time as students, Maya felt a sense of completion. The scared new girl who'd walked through these doors 9 months ago was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, more purposeful. But she hadn't been replaced so much as revealed. The strength had always been there, hidden beneath baggy clothes and thick glasses. The courage had always existed, waiting for the moment it was needed. The leader had always lived within the girl who just wanted to be invisible. "Thank you," she said suddenly, surprising herself and the 3 boys. "For what?" Vince asked, confused. "For making your life miserable?" "For giving me the push to stop hiding," Maya said. "I never would have chosen to reveal myself, to teach others, to lead change. You forced me out of my comfort zone, and while your methods were terrible, the result was transformative." "That's a very generous interpretation," Travis said. "It's an honest one. I'm not thanking you for bullying me. That was wrong and harmful and inexcusable. But our confrontation became the catalyst for something important, something that will help students for years to come." They walked out of the school together, an unlikely quartet united by a violent moment that had become a foundation for peace. Behind them, the east stairwell stood as monument to the possibility of change, the power of courage, and the strength found not in dominating others, but in lifting them up. Maya's father was waiting in the parking lot, pride evident in his bearing as he watched his daughter say goodbye to her unlikely allies. He'd worried so much about her being bullied, about her having to use the skills he'd taught her. He'd never imagined she would use those skills, not just to protect herself, but to transform an entire school culture. As they drove away from Westlake for the last time, Maya attached the brass knuckles keychain to her rearview mirror, a reminder of a journey that had begun with harassment and ended with hope. "No regrets?" her father asked. "None," Maya said firmly. "Every choice led to something important. Even the choice to fight. Especially that choice. Sometimes the most important battles are the ones we don't want to fight, but can't avoid. The key is making sure that when the fighting ends, something better can begin." The summer after graduation passed quickly. Maya taught advanced classes in the self-defense program, preparing the next generation of peer instructors. She worked with the district to refine the anti-bullying protocols, ensuring they addressed root causes rather than just symptoms. Before leaving for college, she received an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 40s, professionally dressed but with tired eyes, knocked on her door one evening. "Miss Novak, I'm Patricia Martinez. My son Kevin was a student at Westlake last year." Maya recognized the name. Kevin Martinez, the student Marcus had mentioned, who'd had a breakdown after standing up to Vince and his crew. "I wanted to thank you," Mrs. Martinez continued. "Kevin's been following what happened at Westlake after he left. Seeing those boys face consequences, seeing them change, it's helped him heal. He wished he could have stayed and been part of the transformation." "I'm sorry for what he went through," Maya said sincerely. "No one should have to leave school because of bullying." "He's doing better now. He's even considering returning for senior year, knowing the environment has changed. You gave him hope that bullies can be stopped, that victims can fight back." After Mrs. Martinez left, Maya thought about all the unnamed victims who'd suffered before she'd arrived at Westlake. Her moment of crisis had become their vindication, proof that the bullies weren't invincible, that change was possible. The night before leaving for college, Maya had one final training session with her father in their garage gym. They sparred with the easy rhythm of people who knew each other's moves intimately, a dance of attack and defense that had been refined over 11 years. "You know what I'm most proud of?" her father asked as they cooled down. "That I defended myself? Number that you knew when to stop." In that stairwell, with all that anger and fear and adrenaline, you had those boys completely at your mercy. You could have seriously hurt them, and no one would have blamed you, but you didn't. You used exactly the force necessary and no more. That's the mark of a true warrior. Master Chen would say a true warrior wins without fighting. But when fighting becomes unavoidable, a true warrior fights with honor. You did that, Maya. You fought with honor and then built peace from the victory. College brought new challenges and opportunities, but Maya carried the lessons of Westlake with her. She continued teaching self-defense, now to college students facing their own challenges. She studied criminal justice and psychology, preparing for a career helping victims of violence and working with perpetrators who showed genuine desire to change. During winter break of her freshman year, she returned to Westlake at Principal Winter's invitation. The self-defense program had evolved into a comprehensive violence prevention initiative that included peer counseling, restorative justice circles, and ongoing support for both victims and reformed bullies. Standing in the gym where she'd taught her first nervous class, Maya addressed a new generation of students, many of whom knew her only as a legend, the girl who'd taken down 3 bullies and transformed a school. "I want to tell you about fear," she began, surprising them. They'd expected her to start with strength or courage. "When I came to Westlake, I was afraid every day. Afraid of being noticed, afraid of being targeted, afraid of having to use the skills I'd trained so hard to develop. Fear made me small, made me hide, made me accept treatment I shouldn't have accepted." She demonstrated a basic defensive stance, muscle memory making the movement fluid and natural. "But fear also kept me alert, kept me prepared, kept me training, even when I hoped I'd never need those skills. Fear can be a teacher if you let it guide rather than control you." A student raised her hand. "Were you afraid when you fought them?" "Terrified," Maya admitted. 3 against 1, all bigger than me in an isolated location, but I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't fight, of what they would do to me, and eventually to others if someone didn't stop them." "Do you regret it?" another student asked. "The fighting? I regret that it was necessary, that the situation escalated to that point. But I don't regret defending myself. No one should ever regret protecting themselves from assault." After the presentation, Maya walked through the halls of her old school, noting the changes. The east stairwell had become a gathering place for students, its transformation complete. She found Vince there, home from college for winter break, giving a presentation to current students about his journey from bully to advocate. "The person I was when I ruled this stairwell through fear was weak," he was saying. "I thought power meant making others feel small. Maya taught me that real power is helping others feel strong." They nodded to each other, a recognition between former enemies who'd become part of something larger than their conflict. That evening, Maya met with Aisha, Jennifer, and Marcus at a coffee shop near school. They'd all gone to different colleges, but maintained their friendship, bonded by the extraordinary year they'd shared. "Did you ever think we'd be nostalgic about high school?" Jennifer asked. "Most people can't wait to forget it." "We were part of something special," Marcus said. "How many people can say they helped transform their entire school culture?" "Maya can," Aisha said, raising her coffee cup in a toast. "We all can," Maya corrected. "It took a community. I was just the catalyst." "The badass ninja catalyst," Jennifer added with a grin. They laughed, but Maya thought about catalysts, about how sometimes change required a dramatic moment to begin. The confrontation in the stairwell had been that moment, but the real work had been everything that came after, the slow, patient building of something better. Years passed. Maya completed her degree and began working as a victim advocate while pursuing graduate studies in restorative justice. She kept in touch with the Westlake program, watching with pride as it became a national model for bullying prevention and culture change. Vince became a social worker, specializing in anger management and toxic masculinity intervention. He often spoke at schools about his journey, using his story to help other bullies recognize the path they were on. Travis became a high school wrestling coach and health teacher, emphasizing consent and respect in all his interactions. He married a fellow teacher who'd initially been skeptical of his transformation, but came to see the genuine change in him. Dylan worked in cybersecurity, developing programs to protect vulnerable populations online. He created a non-profit that provided free digital safety training to schools, his insider knowledge of cyberbullying tactics making him uniquely effective. 10 years after the stairwell incident, they all returned to Westlake for the dedication of the Maya Novak Center for Student Empowerment, a new wing that housed the self-defense programs, peer counseling services, and restorative justice initiatives that had grown from that single moment of crisis. Maya stood uncomfortably at the podium, still preferring invisibility despite a decade of being in the spotlight. "I came to Westlake as a 16-year-old girl who just wanted to get through high school unnoticed," she began. "I left as someone who understood that hiding our strength helps no one. The skills we possess, whether physical, emotional, or intellectual, are meant to be shared, especially in service of those who haven't yet found their own strength." She looked at the audience. Current students, alumni, teachers, her father in his dress uniform, even Mrs. Martinez with Kevin, who had returned to graduate from Westlake after all. What happened in that stairwell 10 years ago was a moment of crisis that became a moment of opportunity. Not because violence is the answer, but because standing up to bullies, in whatever form that takes, is essential for creating safe communities. After the ceremony, Maya stood in the transformed East stairwell with Vince, Travis, and Dylan. They were adults now, shaped by their choices both good and bad, united by a shared history that had defined their paths. "Did you ever imagine this?" Travis asked, gesturing at the building named in Maya's honor. "Never," Maya said honestly. "I just wanted them to stop harassing me." "And we just wanted to feel powerful," Vince added. "Funny how wrong we all were about what we needed." "You needed to be stopped," Maya said. "I needed to stop hiding. The school needed systemic change. We all got what we needed, just not how we expected." As they stood there, a current student approached hesitantly, a small freshman girl who reminded Maya of herself at that age. "Miss Novak, I'm being bullied and I don't know what to do." Maya knelt to the girl's eye level, just as Master Chen had done with her so many years ago. "First, you tell someone, a teacher, a counselor, your parents. Don't suffer in silence. Second, you join the empowerment program. Learn to defend yourself, but more importantly, learn that you're not alone. And third," she looked at the three men standing with her, former bullies who'd become protectors, "remember that even the worst situations can become opportunities for growth." The girl nodded, looking less afraid. As she walked away to find a counselor, Maya thought about cycles, of violence, of fear, of transformation. She'd broken one cycle and started another, one where victims became victors not through domination but through community. The brass knuckles keychain still hung from her car keys, tarnished now but treasured. A reminder of enemies who became allies, of violence that led to peace, of a moment when a quiet girl stopped hiding and changed everything. Standing in that stairwell, surrounded by the artwork and quotes that had replaced fear with hope, Maya realized that this had always been her destiny. Not to be invisible, but to be a beacon for others finding their way from darkness to light. The girl who'd wanted to hide had become someone who couldn't be ignored, and in that transformation, she'd helped transform everyone around her. The story that began with three bullies cornering a new girl had become legend, but more importantly, it had become a blueprint for change. Every year, new students heard about the girl who fought back, the bullies who changed, the school that chose to be better. And every year, the cycle of transformation continued, proof that even the darkest moments could become foundations for light. As Maya left Westlake that day, she thought about her mother, who died before she could see her daughter grow into a warrior for peace. She liked to think her mother would be proud, not of the fighting skills, but of the wisdom to know when to use them and when to offer redemption instead of revenge. The shy new girl was gone, had been gone for a decade. In her place stood a woman who understood that true strength wasn't about being invisible or invincible, but about being vulnerable enough to stand up, strong enough to show mercy, and wise enough to build bridges from the ruins of burned ones. The east stairwell would continue to stand as testament to transformation, but the real monument was in the lives changed, the culture shifted, the future victims who would never suffer because someone had been brave enough to say, "No more," and mean it. Maya Novak had wanted to be invisible. Instead, she became unforgettable. And in becoming unforgettable, she made sure that no student at Westlake would ever feel invisible again.